There are so many demands on you. Demands at home, in the boardroom, and in the bedroom. You have to be jack of all trades, wearing a different hat when the moment arises. You're on all the time, always on the clock, always catching up. Take care of you. Introducing Your Media, your podcast network that meets you where you are, when you need it, at your time, in your space, when you feel like it. You come first. Your Media, where you are. Before we, there is I. Married to Me with Popo takes a provocative look at our idea of self and family in the 21st century.
Welcome to the second episode of Married to Me with Popo. I'm still so excited to be doing this. And as promised, this week on
Showdown,
I have Boitumelo, Boikhutso in studio. Boit is someone that I've known for how many years now?
I think it's about
4 years.
Yeah.
I actually met her when we were working at another production house that I can't mention. And she'd come in as a trauma counselor to give advice on our show. And she and I connected, I guess, in a way that was beyond work. Really just our energies aligned, and we'd hang out and have after work drinks. And I mean, we've seen each other through some stuff.
Yeah, we have.
But before we get into that, Boits, thank you so much. Thank you so much for availing yourself. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you in advance for what I know is going to be just a really building and a really important interaction. So tell us about you. Who is Boitumelo Boikhutso?
So Lebohang Boitumelo Boikhutso is a registered trauma counselor by profession, a broadcaster, a mental health practitioner, and founder and director of Boikhutso Consulting, which pretty much deals with trainings and psychoeducational trainings for corporate and communities. And yeah, actually wherever there's human beings, we're pretty much there.
Mm-hmm.
Born and bred in the East Rand.
Yes.
And yeah, man, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay, and just, boys, what was it that drew you to this profession? What was it that said to you, people's trauma is something that I want to heal? I want to interrogate. I want to understand. What was it?
Actually, I'm very glad that you're asking that question, because I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I always say that, psychology picked me. Because my initial, I don't know if you and I have had this conversation, but my initial choice and preference was I was supposed to be in the arts. So I wanted to be on stage, theater. I did a lot of that in high school, and really did well in it. And, my parents were like, actually, we don't know if there's much money in it in our country and all those type of things. Mm-hmm. And I honestly found myself doing a bit of an assessment. And one of the options was PR, and then it was psychology, specializing in traumatology. And for some reason, I was just drawn to that. And that's how I ended up actually doing, psychology, or studying psychology. So I always say to people that psychology picked me. And now it makes sense in hindsight in my life, really, as to what it is that I do. Yeah.
Is art far removed from psychology, though? I really tend to feel that as artists, we are healers of sorts. Music is healing. Movies are healing. When we find things relatable, when we see our lives in other people's lives and we relate to them, I don't think that they really far, but going off topic in true Popo sense. But Boys, today I asked you to come and speak about, what was the topic? I want to read it out accurately. Mm-hmm. How our trauma affects our romantic relationships. generally when I choose topics, I had another show at another point, but everything related back to me and something that I could understand as something that I'd experienced or something that I'd watched another person experience. And recently there was a situation with someone close to me where she completely overreacted about something that her boyfriend had done. And I realized that she reacted in that way because it was a trauma response. It triggered something in her, and I had to sit down with her and be like, this is not that guy who did that to you. You are overreacting, but also I needed to acknowledge why she would react in that way. I wasn't like, you're crazy, like you're unreasonable. I was like, but you can't allow your trauma to steal from you. I really honestly feel that when we don't acknowledge and unearth and heal our trauma, we literally end up stealing from ourselves. We really end up stealing from ourselves. So how what are the properties of trauma? How do you differentiate between this was trauma and this was intuition? I guess sometimes we're just like, oh, it's intuition, but it's not intuition, it's trauma. What's the first step to knowing the difference between those two things?
Look, I think for me, first things first, I mean, if we have to unpack and break down what trauma is, it's after someone has experienced something that is distressing or disturbing. So an extremely distressing or disturbing experience. And that can be, I mean, if that's quite broad, that in itself can really just be anything. It could be a car accident. It could be growing up in a traumatic environment where you were exposed to abuse. It could be a death of a parent, death of a particular caregiver, a child. So really, it's multifaceted in that regard. And again, if people do not process and heal from that, then, you ultimately still remain a bit stuck with that trauma, that undealt with trauma. And I think people think that trauma only gets stuck from an emotional perspective, but it's actually not only just emotional, it's mental and physical as well. So again, there's muscle memory. So even if you've gone through something physically traumatic, your body still kind of, retains that information if you haven't processed it. And there are different therapies and things that one can go through that can assist in that regard. So I think it's also about understanding what trauma is. And then there's also then your intuition and really just picking up on certain, like, look, I'm big on energies. I know both of us are very much energies people and intuition. And just that voice, sometimes when you walk into a space, when you're engaging with someone, to be like, why is there something that's a bit offish? And I think once you know how to discern the two, then you know what is my stuff, what's coming from my trauma, or what is actually me just listening to my intuition at that particular time to be like, no, something is off, So it also depends on how connected a person is with regards to self. I always say relationship with self is so important, and it really helps inform us in knowing how to discern the two, really.
Last week my brother was in studio, and I spoke about a situation where he said to me, you keep attracting the same experience because you give off a desperate energy. I at first I was really upset about that. And then one day I sat back and I was like, why do I keep choosing the same experience? And I'm going to say something that I think people will find quite, I don't know if they're going to take it as insensitive, but I'm going to say it because I think there's some truth to it. I don't know if you've realized that a lot of people who go through abuse, be it physical abuse, sexual abuse, tend to, I'm going to dare say, choose that experience more than once. Generally, a woman who's beaten will find herself being beaten in every relationship. A lot of women who have been raped tend to be raped multiple times. Do you think that that's something that's connected to trauma? Do you think that when there's a certain trauma in us that we do not heal and we don't acknowledge, we tend to attract the same things? It's something that I think about, but I'm not a professional in this area, but it's definitely something that I've questioned. And for me personally, I stopped choosing certain relationships and certain things when I decided to interrogate the root of those things. Once I healed that, then the byproduct of that was changing the choice.
100%.
Changing the choice was the thing that happened second, once I healed the root of it. So do you think there's something to be said about us attracting the same experience when we haven't healed the trauma in us?
Especially if one hasn't healed. I'm not going to overtly say absolutely yes, because with a lot of the people that I've helped and I've had discussions with, there's some people that have gone through those traumas and have not gone through them again. So they've made a conscious decision to kind of be maybe more aware of their settings and those type of things. But generally, those are the people that also go through the process of healing, because like I always say, hurt people.
Absolutely.
So what normally happens is that with people that have experienced those types of traumas, it's either, especially from a physical abuse. So, sexual, I really feel like sometimes you just never know. You might be just in a situation, wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
Look, don't get me wrong. There's certain people that might have pathologies that comes with risk-taking behavior that will put them in those situations. And they know very well when they're walking into those situations that, look, this is most likely going to happen, or it may possibly happen.
Yeah.
And that might go with pathology. So a bit of borderline personality or whatever, is going on with that particular person. But with physical abuse, especially if you come from an environment where that was normalized for you. For you, it was normal seeing your mom abuse your dad. For you, it was normal seeing your dad abuse your mom, or uncle and aunt, or grandfather and grandmother, or whatever the case may be. So for you, subconsciously, you're going, well, maybe that's what healthy relationships look like.
Yeah.
So I've actually literally sat with women that have said, you know what, if there's no physical abuse in this relationship, I feel like he doesn't love me. Agang shy, that means, he's busy, preoccupied with someone else, because I'm not getting that negative attention at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's been normalized for that person. And what's actually quite interesting as well is that then people that like that find themselves in healthier relationships, they tend to have a bit more anxiety because it's foreign for them. It's foreign to be regarded in such a positive manner that they've normalized the negativity from that. And again, if they have not healed and identified how they were wounded by being exposed to that trauma, they continue, it just becomes a cycle. And then they have children, they get married to their abusers, the kids get exposed to that, and it literally just becomes a whole generational cycle at the end of the day. Why? Because no one was like, listen, this was actually not okay. I'm owning my pain, and I'm actually going to go and unpack and heal and deal and process it at the end of the day, which I know it's easier said than done for a lot of people. But once you embark on that journey, then obviously there's a huge shift. There's a huge personal now positive regard. Your energies shift as well, because now you're literally healing from the core out.
Yeah. I'll say this. I and Boitz knows, she knows me. I definitely had a certain type.
Yeah.
And that type, he's charismatic. He's funny. He's the loudest in the room. He's attractive, but he's arrogant and he's unreliable.
Yeah.
And I would dare say that is something that I'm still battling with right now. My wife had a conversation with me, I think it was yesterday, actually, like very recently. And she was just like, babe, I know you wanna be in a relationship, but you need to think beyond yourself when you make that choice. Because last week I was speaking about our family dynamic, and the fact of the matter is, anyone who's gonna come into my life is coming into our lives.
Yeah.
And he needs to work for the family dynamic. Her boyfriend has literally stepped into the fold, and it's not her boyfriend. That guy's going to marry her. Anyway,
I just got this
has literally stepped into the fold, as he doesn't have any kids, but he takes our children as his. He takes me as a partner of sorts. He's her boyfriend, but when he thinks of her and her family, he thinks of me as well. So I can't bring someone into the family who's going to be unreliable and really an asshole. I like assholes.
You generally do, my friend. And can I add on to your description as well?
Yeah.
What I noticed in the pattern is that they were also emotionally unavailable.
Yeah.
There's something about you being attracted to the emotionally unavailable man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I said, still something I need to work through, but it's something I am working through. And I think I told you that I'm now celibate, and I've decided that I am going to focus on what it is I want, what the most important things are, and put that out there, and hopefully it comes in something sexy, because
it will. Guys, you should have seen her face.
Because I like me a sexy man, you know.
Delicious.
I like me a tall man. I like grata charisma, man. Like grata
ambiance.
You know, when a guy walks in, it's like zaga zaga, you know. But I definitely need to be making like healthier choices, and 100%. It's something I need to take responsibility for, you know. So I think, Boits, what people would assume is that someone like you, who's a trauma counselor, would probably make like perfect choices, and just like with men and navigation of life, and just be like, oh, I'm not deserved in this space, yes. I'm deserved in that space, you know. And when we met, you were dating someone, you guys subsequently got engaged.
Yeah.
And then we spoke the other day, and you were like, that's done.
That's done, fam.
How do you, as a professional, make that error? I think it's important to speak about, right?
Yes.
Because I think people somehow feel like professionals are somehow perfect.
Yeah.
You know, but you're still human.
Yes.
You know, and I just think there's something to be learned from. I haven't even really asked you like what happened there and how you ended up with him and saying yes and then turning around and going back on your decision. I figured let's rather speak about it here, because I feel like there's probably some learning in it.
100%, love. Yeah. And I love what you just said now, you know, with regards to I'm human first.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm always apprehensive in telling people that I come across what it is that I do, because immediately they're like, oh, how you psychoanalyzing me and all of this. And I'm like, no, this is Boits, this is Boitumelo.
Yeah.
My patients know how I am in therapy. Right now, this is my authentic self. Not that I'm not authentic in therapy, but this is just me as I am outside of my profession, you know? And so, yes, just to answer your question, definitely human first. And look, I mean, it was almost 4 years of, you know, look, there's no regrets, number one. I think I want to start off there. Definitely no regrets, because I'm the woman that I am now, that I am so in love with. Like, I'm all kinds of in love with myself.
Yes,
because of that journey, you know, as much as when things ended between him and I, and look, ultimately, I would say it was an amicable breakup. But at the same time, I was like, no, not really. I needed to kind of just cut it.
Yeah.
And that was also a process of me choosing myself.
Yeah.
And realizing that, look, there is like, I don't want to say a savior complex, but I know my spirit and I know myself that, again, it's, you know, what we call it in psychology when we're going through our training and our studies is like the wounded healer. So, you know, once you've kind of resolved and worked on your wounds, you tend to kind of attract people that are quite wounded, you know, and some much more deeper than others. And then you try and go, oh no, I can see the potential in this person. There's room for growth and all of that, which there is. Most of the time it's absolutely spot on. But then we tend to forget that that person needs to now do the work and put in the work. They need to acknowledge what their past traumas are, what their stuff is, and actually choose to work on themselves. You can't do that for them. So as much as I knew maybe, you know, like you know, where were the missing kind of elements in terms of just self and that person just growing as a man, it was a matter of, but he needs to see that, because it doesn't matter how many times you put it on the table and you try and show them, if they don't see anything wrong in their behavior, in their thought processes, you know, it's not your job. And that time, I mean, Pali, I cannot see, but, you know, I can only see, I don't have a child. So I was like, you know, that's not my responsibility. I think for the longest of time, even, you know, outside, well, no, within my relationships, it's just kind of realizing, getting to that space to be like, you're not responsible for that person in that way.
Yeah.
You know, you're actually supposed to be their homie, lover, friend, not their mother and their, you know, caregiver and all those type of things.
Yeah.
So again, it was just a growth and a growing kind of experience, even though, I mean, it was almost, you know, happily ever after. So that's what I'm grateful about, is that, you know, you get to a point where you're going, I need to choose myself, because it is that toxic now.
Yeah.
It's toxic for that person as an individual, but now you and that person are in a relationship. Therefore, those things have a ripple effect and they trickle through to you. And that ultimately will become your stuff. You know, so that was that. Look, it was very traumatizing in its own right.
Of course.
Especially, you know, when there's like infidelities and stuff kind of involved, you know, especially because it was something that I'd never experienced before in relationships. So also just taking the time to heal. And immediately I was like, it's done. It's a very difficult decision, probably one of the difficult decisions that I had to do or make in my life. And immediately from there, before even telling my family or my friends, I immediately went to therapy and I sat with the uncomfortable. I sat with my pain. I got acquainted with my pain. I processed it. I understood where it was coming from. I took accountability in terms of what I enabled in the relationship as well. Because I mean, again, he wasn't dating himself. So there was something within me that made that okay for a while. There was something in me that, you know, accommodated certain traits, even though I knew that it doesn't speak to who I am and what I want. But I kind of said it was okay when it wasn't okay. So I needed to go sort out my own shit before now I go out and call someone out. And that's exactly what I did. And I was like, look, not angry, hurt, disappointed, sad. And I'll sit with that, but I don't deserve that. And really, I do deserve better. So ultimately, it came back to the relationship that I have with myself. And I'd neglected myself for the longest of time, emotionally and mentally. And I think that for me was a bit of a rude awakening that I needed. So, yeah.
I think it speaks to an issue that I think a lot of women have, and that I had as well, this hero syndrome thing. Women who are, specifically women who are attracted to broken people, you know, and a weird thing happens, you know, because somehow we do, some of us actually heal them, like we heal them. But here's the problem. And my mom said this to a friend of mine who was like, hey, this guy, hey, he did this. Hey. And my mom was just like, my darling, so you guys like patience, basically.
The project.
And here's the thing. When a patient, when someone's sick, they go to the hospital. Like, and then what happens when they're healed? They're discharged.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We were like, oh, mom, that's cold. Mom, that's cold. But
those are bars.
She had a point. You know, she had a point. And really, what does happen? You literally step in as his mother. So he probably, and I'm not defending infidelity, just by the way. It is never your fault if someone cheats on you. But you probably do cease to be sexy when you've stepped into the shoes of his mother. You know, so I'm just saying that, and I like what you're saying, that yes, those things, you were saying, yes, those things were true about him, but he wasn't in a relationship by himself.
No, 100%.
You know, and what you did was you interrogated your responsibility and your contribution to the situation that you found yourself in.
100%.
You know, so I think it's really important that even in having these conversations, we don't just have conversations.
Yes.
You know, so not everyone can afford therapy or counseling, but how what can a person do to maybe identify for themselves what comes from a place of trauma and what comes from another place? Because I think it can get really confusing, boys. Like I even think for me, a lot of things and you know, sometimes we tend to be really defensive. We're just like, no, but this is how I feel, and I feel this way because he did this. And when really it's you and you're projecting, and you know, what steps can a person take in order to look at a situation and acknowledge their contribution to us, what their contribution to it is, what's true, what's not true, what's coming from them, what they're actually reading, like what exercises do you think a person can undergo just to begin that process? Because there are so many people, there's millions of people running around the world with all this trauma, you know, and it's being ignored, and everything just falls apart every single time, you know, but there isn't a voice that's saying, sit down, keep quiet, be silent, sit with yourself, introspect, what can people do? What would you encourage them to do just to begin that process of unearthing and healing what is trauma?
Look, I think first things first for me is that people shouldn't, run away from self. I think a lot of people go around kind of, doing all these things externally because they're avoiding the internal. So for me, it's always introspecting and just creating that self-awareness. Number one, sit down with yourself and ask yourself, like, look, let me look at my bringing. And look, Bali, between you and I, when I think about our bringings and our backgrounds, I'm like, we weren't really exposed to much trauma. Like, I really had to dig deep to be like, hey, man.
The SD card is full.
Really?
The recording has stopped.
Don't joke.
I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
So what can happen now?
I don't know.
Is there anything that you can delete from there?
I don't know. I'm going to end this broadcast, guys. The SD card is full, so I'm going to have to speak to my other guest on the other SD card.